Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the return of the hooligan. He's on French soil for Euro 2016. We're talking about it with France 24's Kedevan Gorgestani, who's been watching football and a bit of the pushing and shoving that's been going on in the streets of northern France the last 2 days. She joins us from the French city of Lens, where earlier England defeated Wales 2-1. Welcome back as well to historian Sébastien Louis, author of The Hooligan Phenomenon in Italy, History of Hooliganism from 1968 to 2005. Edouard Chanot, journalist for the French language edition of Russian news website Sputnik. And joining us from Moscow, Vladimir Kozlov, the author of Fanity, or Soccer Fans. Welcome back to all of you. We were saying before the break, 3 Russian nationals behind bars. They've been sentenced to up to 2 years in prison here in France for the violence witnessed over the weekend in Marseille on the sidelines of England versus Russia. In part one of our discussion, you heard from one sportscaster in Moscow saying there's not a lot that the Russian Federation can do. Well, among the 20 Russian men that are due for deportation next week is a certain Alexander Shpirgin, spokesperson for the Russian Union of Supporters. He's known for his ties to the far right. He officially had accreditation for the Euro with the delegation. Shpirgin telling the Associated Press, we consider it a political decision, insisting that none of the 20 had been involved in the violence. But Shpirgin's racist comments are well chronicled, and he works for Deputy Speaker of Parliament Igor Lebedev, an MP from the Nationalist Liberal Democratic Party, who also sits on the executive committee of the Russian Football Union. Here's what he tweeted: "I don't see anything wrong with fans fighting. Quite the opposite. Well done, lads. Keep it up." Edouard Chanot, your reaction to that?
Well, I cannot. Sputnik is not a member of the Russian government or from the Duma, so I cannot.
Of course not.
Cannot speak in for them. Maybe this was undiplomatic. There is no point in saying. I mean, no point in denying that Russian hooligans are violent.
But does it make you wonder when we find out this man who's the assistant to that parliamentarian is there with an official badge? He comes along, that the Russians perhaps could have done more to stop those 150 hardliners who in Marseille caused a lot of trouble and left 2 people in serious condition in hospital?
Well, I'm a journalist for Sputnik. I cannot comment on the Russian government not doing enough. I will be glad to put you in touch with Russian officials if needed.
Sure.
About that, but.
Vladimir Kozlov, your thoughts?
First, there should be no misunderstanding. This person you just mentioned, Alexander Shpirgin, he's really a sports official. He's not a spokesman, but he actually head of this organization, the National Union of Supporters. And he does have a background of being a football hooligan, but that was years ago, maybe 15 years ago. He's been a sports official for 10 years or more. And
how do you feel about his boss, who's again a member of the Russian Football Union, encouraging the hooligans in Marseille?
He's not a serious politician. This has to be understood. And this party, he is a member of the Liberal Democratic Party, is not really viewed as something serious. This party has done a lot to cash in on the nationalist agenda. But again, even this comment sounded quite outrageous, and President Putin's spokesman actually commented on that, saying that this should not be viewed as Russia's official position in no way, because it did sound too outrageous even for the Kremlin, and even given this rhetoric that Russia is a great country, I don't think anyone in the Kremlin really wants to face this risk of losing the World Cup because of some hooligans.
Let me bring in Sébastien Louis on this. Could Russian authorities have done more in anticipation to prevent what we saw in Marseille?
I think it's quite hard to prevent such kind of things, because it's true that there is less violence in the stadium in Russia, but the violence is not anymore in the stadium, it's outside of the stadium. There is this free fight organized by the hooligan mob and hooligan gang. They are all connected. They are all connected on social media. They are connected with mobile phone. They just agree during the week where to meet, mainly in the forest, 15 against 15, 20 against 20, sometimes 200 against 200, far away from the center of the city, far away from the stadium, and they just clash for 1 minute, 1 minute 30 maximum. And there is some rules, it's very strange, but it's a whole subculture, and we have to understand it like this. So to fight, I think the Russian authority are like a lot of countries in Europe, they don't know how to deal with it. It needs a lot of work of intelligence to know what people, of research, with researcher, university people knowing the thing. And also, as I said, it's a whole work about prevention, but it's not so easy.
We're seeing a lot of reports since the weekend, some claiming that Vladimir Putin, to handle the far right, part of it is to, well, manage a bit relations with some of these ultra groups. Is that substantiated?
It's much more complicated than this, because in fact, just have a look to the banners they had at the stadium. Most of them, the real hardcore, they are putting black, yellow and white banner of the Russian Empire. There is a whole rhetoric that they use, but most of them, they are not militant. They use this rhetoric of Great Russia, even in the stickers. If you had a look on the stickers, well, all around Marseille, there was the stickers which put Russians are coming with a beer on a tank, and some were using even the rhetoric of the Great Patriotic War of World War II. So it's really strange, because they use some of elements, and I don't think the government connection could exist, but it doesn't exist directly. And for sure, from a geopolitical point of view, it's really a huge damage to Russia, and especially in 2 years there is this World Cup.
One reaction coming to us on the hashtag F24 debate: if anything, Russia should be glad French police arrested these hooligans. If those thugs had attacked in the stadium, Russia would have been excluded. And we are again hearing that Russian intelligence helped in the conviction of those three. Kedevan Gorgistani, the vast majority of fans coming to the game, they're not hooligans.
No, that's exactly what we saw yesterday in Lille at the Stade Pierre-Mauroy before Russia-Slovakia. There were groups of young men, there were families, there were really everyone going there just to see the game, and that's really where the difference is, and that's where there are different types of hooligans or violent group, if I can say. The people we saw in Marseille, especially the Russians that were fighting, were clearly groups of hardcore hooligans. The French authorities said there were about 150 of them, calling them highly trained. And these men, if you look at some of the images, you can see, and there were reports that differentiated those hooligans from the English supporters who were participating in the fight. But you could tell that one group was very well prepared, was there to fight, and was very, very sober, whereas the other group were also violent, but they were England fans who were there to watch the game, to drink, and to get into a fight. So I think there's also a difference in graduation, maybe, of these different groups of fans that we saw, if you can call them fans. And in the streets of Lille and even here, there have been clashes, but when you look at these people, they're not necessarily hooligans. And I think it's important to say that there was a lot of cooperation between France and England way ahead of the Euro to prevent known hardcore hooligans from England to even make it to France, whereas it seems that the cooperation didn't work quite so well between France and Russia. And you mentioned earlier, some of our guests mentioned the example of Germany with how the police were dealing with it, but you have to remember that for the World Cup in Germany, hundreds of people had been rounded up before the games started because they were known to be threats, and they wanted to keep them off the streets before the games began. So there's a lot of blame to go around, but I think there's not one specific target in this case.
All right, and remember, just for our viewers, that this targeted a diplomatic incident on Wednesday, France's ambassador, summoned by the Russian Foreign Ministry over the sequestering over the weekend of that fan bus of Russian supporters near Marseille. Authorities in Moscow irate, saying the consulate or the embassy weren't even notified.
It is inadmissible to behave the way our citizens did. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the absolutely provocative actions of fans from other countries. You have probably seen the outrageous footage on television, where the Russian flag is being trampled, where there are insults against the Russian government, and insults against leading Russian sportsmen are being chanted. One should not punch someone else in the head, but it is inadmissible to ignore the provocateurs, who are trying stealthily to create a crisis situation.
Louis, was it justified summoning the French ambassador?
This is a different point. For sure, now it's a geopolitical issue, this case, because in all the world there is a very negative image about Russia. There is also this fighting in the stadium, which were terrible because it was 18 years we didn't see some clash in the stadium. So for sure, the image is really bad. But at the same time, I think we have to keep on mind that there was some mistake, and the violence in the stadium, it's a very complicated issue. It cannot... To deal with violence in the stadium, there will always be violence in the stadium. At the end of the 19th century in England, there was already clash between football fans. In Italy, in 1914, fans of Livorno and Pisa were shooting one against each other. So it's a very complicated issue, very delicate, as I said, and to deal with it and now to put geopolitical issue between France and Russia, I think it will not help for nothing.
All right, on the hashtag F24 debate, this comment, too many incidents in Euro 2016. This is more than hooliganism. It's hate. The old and sick Europe is back. Scary. And there is, Edouard Chanot, this feeling of East versus West to all of this feel to it. Or are we reading too much into it?
Well, as Mr. Vincent Louis said, there is definitely some kind of bias towards Russia, which is maybe the bit of the background of the whole problem. This is going a bit too political, maybe, because any fight is two-sided, and there is that problem of British or French media being overly biased towards Russia.
Against Russia, you're saying?
Yeah, against Russia, of course. For instance, L'Équipe was mentioning
the French
sports outlet was mentioning British supporters against Russian thugs or even hooligans. That's a bit too far-fetched to my mind. According to our sources, we've been interviewing hooligans all across Europe. Everyone was getting prepared for this game. Even British, even if they don't have the same culture as they had previously, they were preparing for this. They were talking about it on hooligans forums and so on. Of course, the Russians hooligans were violent. There is no point in denying that. But any fight is two-sided, and I think we should be more balanced in trying to frame this issue.
Was it a case, Sébastien Louis, of the French feeling foolish because they were unable to catch any of those Russians on the day?
Yes, this was quite a failure. We see it of the police, and especially about the tactic, because it was heavy riot police was there, and we had a light group of Russians who know perfectly the city of Marseille and were looking for target. In fact, it was a mistake because the targets they attacked were not the hooligans that everybody knew about it. The Russians just make a coup in front of the world of hooliganism, in the forum, everywhere. And now, for sure, people will look for another exploit of this kind of group and gang.
Vladimir Kozlov, your reaction to the fact that this turned into a diplomatic incident with the French ambassador summoned?
I think it was indeed a mistake, and those people who were detained, they were on that bus, they were not really hooligans. And I think because of this mistake, the issue is not being investigated properly. I think the French police were just looking for scapegoats because they were able to detain some hooligans, but not all of them. And they were just trying to figure out what other Russian fans, regular fans, not hooligans, could be dangerous. Frankly, I don't think there were hooligans on that bus.
All right. On the same day that the French ambassador was being summoned in Moscow, the head of the opposition Conservatives, former President Nicolas Sarkozy, was being welcomed in St. Petersburg with open arms, along with his wife, Carla Bruni, by President Putin. Sébastien Louis, was that the wrong day to be going to St. Petersburg in view of the fact that the ambassador had been summoned?
This is, I think, as I said already, another issue, and I prefer not to comment. It's true, it's not the best thing to do, but at the same time, if we want just to do some bashing about some people, I think we have to take a bit of, maybe it's a good thing what happened, to think in Europe how we can deal with hooliganism, how we can deal with radical football fans, how we can deal with violence in football, because as I said, it's 120 years there is violence in football in Europe. And maybe it will be interesting to say, maybe there was a failure, and there was for sure, in the stadium, out of the stadium, and we can rethink all the connection of the strategy of the police, first of all, and maybe to think about a European agency to prevent this kind of behavior.
A European agency. More broadly, Vladimir Kozlov, let me ask you, because we saw with when Russia hosted the Winter Olympics, just how much it meant politically for President Putin. How much does it mean to him hosting the World Cup?
It certainly means a lot, maybe even more than the Olympics. And this is why the Russian authorities are eager to distance themselves from the hooligans, and they are really at pains trying to persuade everyone that Russia is capable of properly handling security at the World Cup. Soccer is very popular in Russia, and I think probably there are more soccer fans here than fans of all those winter sports, and it's a major political thing to host the World Cup. Like 2 years ago, when Russia hosted the Olympic Games, it was considered a big political project, and it's absolutely the same thing.
All right, reaction on Facebook on the hashtag F24 debate. So ashamed to be English right now. Please show your host country some respect and just enjoy the football. France has been through a lot lately. They're still in a state of emergency, transport strikes, mass protests, riots. Give the authorities a break. They are there to protect you. Kedevan Gorgistani, that brings us to another important point. Wednesday night, when France beat Albania, we saw President Hollande at the stadium. And this is a country that has been through a lot lately. How much does Euro 2016 mean for the hosts?
I think it's something we've seen throughout France, throughout all the supporters. Every time we've been to a game, we were at the Stade de France for the opening game, and every fan we spoke to kind of had a word about that, whether it was we need to win because that will give us a breath of fresh air, or we've been through so much, we need something positive. So there was always this in the back of their minds, not just because it's great to win, but also because people are really hoping for something positive to come out of this Euro. It's already seen as a party because of course, it brings a lot of people in all these cities. There are a lot of people celebrating this Euro 2016. But really, what people want, what the French want, is this win. We spoke a few weeks ago with former French international David Ginola, and he was saying that he was wishing to have, if possible, a final between Belgium and France, because that would be a great image, because those two countries have been through terror attacks, and that would be a great end to this Euro 2016.
We've talked a lot about hooligans, of course, over the past hour. Edouard Chanot, France, the last time it hosted a major tournament, 1998 World Cup, they win. And people celebrated the fact that here was a team that had represented all of France with blacks, people from North Africa. This time around, could this be this moment where we have this country that's frayed and divided and it comes together around football?
Well, first it has to happen, but if it happens, I guess I pretty much assume the media will portray it that way. Well, it could be discussed because a few weeks back Benzema accused Didier Deschamps of racism. So, it could happen. I don't know if it will be the best way to picture it.
Sébastien Louis?
We'll see. I think we've got a lot of political content in the football, and we saw after '98 that the real diversity was not. There was not so much diversity in the French. It's true that the French football team and football in general is portrayed as society. It's a kind of mirror of a society. Not a perfect mirror, but it explains a lot. It explains a lot about people. It's a kind of metaphor at the end of the human condition, maybe football.
All right, we're going to be, of course, talking about that metaphor all the way to the final on July the 10th. Sébastien Louis, I want to thank you. I want to thank Edouard Chanot, Vladimir Kozlov in Moscow, and Kedevan Gorgistani in Lens on the back end of that 2-1 win by England over Wales. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Kedevan Gorgistani. We already in Lens. Sorry, I'm still thinking about Lens because of the
That's quite all right.
the match. Emma James, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You are Emma James.
I am, yes.
Okay.
We can confirm that. Yes, but taking a look at the issue of hooligans and Russians in particular. And it's quite interesting to see the way in which it is very unsympathetically portrayed by around the world, frankly. The Guardian has this particular story saying that the head of the official Russia supporters group was actually brought into France along with the official delegation. So there are questions being asked about just how much the people in power in Russia not only don't mind this, but are actually endorsing it. If we take a look at the Daily Beast, what they have to say is that the Kremlin backs brawling soccer hooligans in France. This article says they are ready, willing and eager for battle, and that for the hooligans, rioting is a sport more important than the football itself. The Brits are seen as the fading champions ready to be toppled because, of course, British, English in particular, football fans have always had that terrible reputation for hooliganism, and Russia appears to be wanting to steal that particular mantle.
At the beginning of the show, you were saying how hooliganism has gone east. Is this a fair portrayal?
It's a fair portrait because there is an unofficial competition. As you said, it's very right. In fact, there is a competition on the pitch with 22 players, and there is a competition in the street with hooliganism. And now in the top 3 for sure of the world, Russian hooligan put their name on the top.
Now, this article also talks about the fact that the French police, suffering from this kind of perfect storm of threats, whether it's terror, floods, violent protests, are in no mood to mollycoddle hooligans. However, if we look at the kind of reactions from Russian people in sort of both in politics and in the football world themselves, they seem to think that the French haven't gone far enough. The Russian Football Union board member told this journalist that he wouldn't condemn Russian fans and argues that the French should have put tanks on the streets in Marseille. ESPN reporting that a senior Russian official says French police are only used to gay parades. This was actually Vladimir Markin, who is the head of Russia's equivalent of the FBI, if you like, or spokesperson, I should say. He says a proper man comes as a shock to them. They're used to seeing men at gay parades. And Igor Lebedev, Russia's FA Executive Committee chief, said that 90% of the fans go to football to fight, and that is normal. Our guys stood for our country. And a lot of people now wondering what this means for the World Cup in 2018. Comments like this very widespread on Twitter. Thinking of going to the World Cup in Russia, think again, here's the welcoming committee. This one, oh, the joys of the beautiful game and the global showpiece, what a warm welcome awaits in Moscow. However, there are some who feel that it's perhaps being blown out of proportion. He says, Tancredi Palmieri here says that it's nonsense to say that this puts a threat to the 2018 World Cup. You don't mess around with Putin's police. I doubt there will be these riots. Putting it into global perspective,
That's what our panel said.
Indeed. Putting it into more global perspective, Ken Roth of the Human Rights Watch group says that Russia can help to kill all the Syrians at once, but don't beat up European football fans, just showing how much the focus has moved from Syria now to football violence.
All right. Another story that you're following for us, and our top story, is the tragic shooting and stabbing death of a 41-year-old first-term member of the British Parliament, Jo Cox.
Yes, absolutely. She's been relatively low-key, certainly on the international stage. But as you say, she was only elected last year to Batley and Spen, which is in the north of England, fairly close to Leeds. Campaigning's now been suspended ahead of the Brexit referendum in the wake of her murder. And politicians from all sides have been paying tribute. Obviously, Jeremy Corbyn, because she was a member of the Labour Party, the opposition in the United Kingdom, Jeremy Corbyn said this: the whole of the Labour family, and indeed the whole country, is in shock and grief at the horrific murder of Jo Cox. It's a really very moving tribute that he's written, and he said, among many lovely comments, that she had a lifelong record of public service and a deep commitment to humanity, because before becoming an MP, she worked for Oxfam and she worked for the anti-slavery charity, the Freedom Fund. Looking elsewhere, David Cameron, of course, the Prime Minister, says the death of Jo Cox is a tragedy. She was a committed and caring MP. My thoughts are with her husband, Brendan, and her 2 young children.
Children of the age of 3 and 5. We're going to have to leave it there, but we will, of course, continue to watch that story. Many thanks, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.